In this video, I'm going to cover the importance of presence and influence and some practical strategies you can take now to move from positional leadership to relational leadership so that you are able to create movements and people want to follow you, whatever the change means. Hello and welcome to the Growth Hub, where we talk connecting who you are with how you lead. So it's part personal development, part leadership development, part good old yap, just so that you can get things out of your system. And it's really a space created for leaders and emerging leaders to understand how their unique makeup, your personality, your experiences, the way you kind of synthesize information and the stories you tell yourself, how they impact the communities and the people that you serve. My name is Nisi Ozigbu. I've dedicated my career to change management, so that's helping organizations transition from where they are to where they need to be by understanding the unique needs of the different groups of people involved. And I now partner with senior leaders and organizations to make sure that leadership communities have the skills, the capabilities, the stories, the tools, the verbal and visual positioning to be able to lead in ways that are magnetic. Today, I want to talk about building a followership as a senior leader during times of continuous change. How do you build a following? How do you create movements as a senior leader? And for some of you, you might be thinking, wait, I'm not an influencer. Why do I need to do this? Well, I've got news for you. First of all, you are an influencer. And second of all, you do need that capacity. Let's look at the problem that we have here. And the issue is you've got positional authority versus relational influence. And 9 times out of 10, relational influence will trump positional authority. That's why even when you have the most structured changes, you'll have networks of champions, and you'll want to map out who the influential players are in the organization. And ironically enough, what I've found with over my 15 years of experience leading organizational change in global and national organizations is that the people who are seen as influential aren't always the most senior leaders. And this is because the org chart in terms of power is very much a myth, and anybody who's been in the transformation change project space knows this. We know that just because somebody is high up on the hierarchy, it doesn't mean that what they say goes. And actually what you'll find is in our meetings we'll be talking about, okay, but who do we really need to speak to? Where does the power really lie? And this is because the org chart helps us to chunk people and organize teams in a way that makes sense, but it's not a reflection of where power lies within an organization. So as a leader, the reason why your position might be called into question during times of uncertainty, number one, people see you as the reason why they are in an uncertain position. There's a lot of misunderstanding around the way organizational change is decided and rolled out. And it could be that as a leader of a team, you had nothing to do with the decision to change that's been made. But for your team, you represent that decision. So you as a figurehead become an embodiment of that threat. And if you do not have the relationship in place where your team understand and believe you when you are saying, I know this is going on, but I'm not sure of all of the details. If you do not have that relationship, you immediately become a symbol of that threat. You are the person who has made that decision, and therefore everything that you say is called into question. The second reason why positional leadership doesn't carry as much weight is because people are not silly. We're all adults here. And we know that the way business is done, it's actually a bit of a contradiction as I'm saying it now, though, but we know that business gets done among friends. And if you do not have that relationship with your team, i.e., you are not friends, not in an overly coddling kind of way, but in a kind of respectful, I believe you, there's trust, we've been through some things together. If you do not have that relationship, again, during times of uncertainty, you scream threat. Now, the third reason, I'm sure there's several others, but the third reason I would say that your positional leadership doesn't mean anything during times of uncertainty is also because they don't really care about you. Everybody is so focused on, well, what does this mean for me? So even when you are talking, and if the only power you have is the words that you're saying to your team in that moment, they do not want to hear, because they are laser focused on, well, what does this mean for me? How do I ensure that I survive? What do I do now to get through? And if you are not immediately able to answer those questions with clarity, then what you say doesn't hold any weight. So now let's move on to leadership presence and the real differentiator that comes when you have built that trust, when you've built that relationship, and when your team are moved and motivated to move with you, whatever the change means. Let's define what leadership presence actually is. Leadership presence is about having clarity, about being consistent, about being calm and having connections. So if we take those one at a time, and I'll start with connection. And that's because connection is foundational. You need to have been through some things. You need to have that trust. You need to have that foundation as a basis. Otherwise, that connection is just not going to be connecting in the way that you'd hope. And the only way that you really build trust, funny enough, is by going through trials. Maybe you've worked out ways to be able to disagree in respectful ways within your team. You've been through challenges. You've faced challenges together, and maybe you've faced challenges where you are actively against each other and you've worked through them. This is why keeping the peace at all costs is not great, because then you rob yourself and your team from that chance of building real connection. Think about it. When you've got really good friends, it's because you've fallen out, you've been on holidays, you've seen their good days, you've seen their bad days, and through it all, you've still decided, but I want to walk through life with you. I want to do this area of my life with you because I like you as a person, I trust you, I know we can get through this. If you're in a team and you've never been through that experience, you will lack that connection. So that's why I'm always a massive advocate when I'm working with leaders that don't try and keep things rosy. It's actually good to go through some tests, some trials, some bumps, because once you get through on the other side, the quality of your relationship will be that much better. The next thing is calm, and I feel like this speaks for itself. You do not want to be flying off the handle. You do not want every little tiny thing to set you on edge, and that's why as leaders it's very important to be mindful of our diary, to be mindful of what we are feeding ourselves kind of mentally, emotionally, or not feeding ourselves, i.e. allowing ourselves to become burnt out, to be mindful of not allowing that to happen. Because when you are burnt out, when you're kind of at your last leg, it's very easy to lose that sense of calm, and people can sense it and they don't want to be around that energy. They don't want to come to you. The next is consistency. So it's really, really important that you know what you stand for and you stand for it again and again and again and again and again. A lot of struggles that I see with leaders creating movements or having teams that trust them during uncertainty is because there's not that foundation. They don't know what to expect from their leader, and that's because maybe you've just gone wherever the wind blows. You say one thing, you do another, you're jumping on every new fad. It's really important to have some pillars, some values, purpose that you hold onto no matter what's going on within the organization, so that people know what they can look to you for. And then finally, clarity, which I think relates to that consistency. When you are clear on your purpose, on your values, and you communicate that in the way that you speak, in the way that you conduct yourself, in the way that you performance manage people, i.e. what you allow to fly and what you don't allow to fly, in the boundaries that you set, that all adds to the clarity around who you are. So what you'll see from these descriptions is that leadership isn't just about direction and positional authority. It's about energy. It's about the environment that you create when people are around you, or when you're not there and people can sense that something is missing because this leader is not there. So when you are thinking about creating that relationship with your team, about building yourself so that you are a force to be reckoned with within the organization, think about the energy that you bring to different situations. So why don't people follow you even when you are right? So number one would be your foundation is missing. There's no psychological safety. There's no trust there. People do not believe that if they show up as their full selves. So whether that's unhappy, happy, confused, questioning, curious, whatever it might be, because people often think that psychological safety is about just being able to show what are deemed as like negative or bad traits. But sometimes it's even the good. They don't trust that if they show up as happy or curious, that you will welcome that side of them. So if that is missing because you've been inconsistent, you fly off the handle, you're everything that is against everything that I should be. So you're not going with those 4 C's that I mentioned around clarity, consistency, calm, and connection. If you are missing those 4 C's, what you'll find is that that safety and trust, that foundation is not within your team, and people will not follow you during uncertainty because it threatens their survival. So what you see is that building trust as a leader, even before any change is introduced, is absolutely fundamental.